Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we're going to talk about something I think is quite interesting, and I kind of almost discovered whilst being on a bit of a ramble on my stream yesterday. I was just talking about, what cards would I like to see buffed. Someone, asked me that question, and then it kind of turned into a big long ramble, and I ended up discovering something about this current set Beyond the Bandle that I hadn't really ever thought about before, but then as soon as I sort of said it kind of clicked into place, and I kind of noticed it very much. And I'm talking about power creep. And what is power creep for those of you who aren't aware? Let's just quickly define what it is. Basically, power creep is essentially when a new set comes out, a game developer will often want the new stuff that comes out to be played. It's new, it's exciting, they want people to play it, and so they make it maybe just a bit better than, what has come before it. Now, obviously, that's fine, and people can understand that, and if it's only a little bit better, most people are willing to accept that and say, yeah, fair enough, whatever, we don't mind, it's great, right? Obviously, the problem comes when there's big power creep, when something comes out and it's just way better than everything else, and all the old cards become completely unplayable, and only, new cards aren't really any good. That's when it becomes a bit of a problem. And Runeterra did really, really well, I think, in this department for a long time, and many people said that from Foundations to Rising Tides, there was not that much power creep, that it was really well managed. And then for Call of the Mountain as well, again, the splitting up into 3 sections, I think, helped this quite a bit. In the, because it was now split up into 3 sections, it meant that only, maybe only 1 or 2 cards in each of the different, 3 parts would actually be, one of those strong ones. So instead of getting 6 cards that were these are way better than everything else, it was just 1 or 2 cards, and it became much more acceptable. And people kind of learned how to play around those, early ones first, and then, it just became more manageable, right? And so for Empires Ascended as well, much the same, right? For instance, Merciless Hunter didn't come out in the first set. It came out in the second one, I think. Was it the second or the third one, maybe even? I actually can't remember. But it definitely didn't come out in the first one. But obviously, it was a really strong card when it was a 3-mana 4/3. And, you had, the likes of Ruin Runner, but as I said, Merciless Hunter didn't come out till later. And what that kind of meant was the power creep was very slight in each of the 3 expansions. Now, what that led to often was whatever the new region was, whether it be Targon or Shurima, we saw a similar pattern where, at first and the second expansion, they were kind of the first one, they were pretty bad. The second one, they became okay. And by the end of the third one, they were really good. And that was kind of that slight build-up of power creep, I think, just coming out in different stages, eventually made them really good. But with Beyond the Bandlewood and Bandle City, we have the first expansion of cards that are, the sort of... This is the first expansion that has been known to be split into 3 and, has been designed with that idea of splitting it into 3 in mind. That this is the first time that that's ever happened. And what I've noticed is that this is the first time I think you can say that the power creep of this expansion is just a little too much. Why do I think that? Well, as some of you may know, I have been doing a series about some decks, some older decks, talking, or champions, talking about how bad they actually are. Are they as bad as people really think they are? Are they truly that terrible? And the answer often has been, well, they aren't completely unplayable, but they aren't great. That's kind of been the answer to all of the 3 different videos I've done on that so far. But what I've noticed in particular when I was playing the games, and it might not come across as much in the videos, because, there's more games there that didn't make it into the videos. But what I'm noticing in particular is any time I come up against a Bandle City, a refined Bandle City deck, you have no chance. For instance, when I was playing Nightfall, if I was coming up against a Poppy deck or a Ziggs deck or even Darkness, I just felt like I had no chance. It was it would get to turn 7 or 8 around there, I'd be out of cards. I'd have no cards left in hand. My opponent would have played at the same speed as me, but have 7 cards in hand. We're on about the same life total. The board is pretty even. I've got no cards in hand, and they've got 7 cards in hand. That's what it often felt like was happening. Similar for Draven, Scion, or anything like that. similar kind of effect where I'm running out of cards and you've got a full hand of cards, and we've been playing at the same speed. You know, we've both been playing cards and trading at the same amount. It's been an even game so far, but you've just got way more cards and way more options available to you than I do right now. And that is noticeable power creep. Because that is insane. You shouldn't be able to play one of these old decks and feel like you've just completely run out of steam and your opponent hasn't, but you also were never able to pressure them either. It wasn't like they couldn't play their cards because they've got high mana cards. They were playing their cards, but still you couldn't put any pressure on them, and they've still got a full hand. That is the problem, right? And that is what I think has potentially gone wrong with this expansion. Now, I think a lot of people have said, like, oh, this has been a really successful expansion. This has been a really great expansion. And I think they say that because there has been a lot of, you know, playable new things. You know, Darkness is perhaps one of the better control decks around. Of course, there's plenty of Poppy decks. There's plenty of Ziggs decks. You know, you've got Landmark decks coming about. You know, there's plenty of good things. Nami is, of course, good. It feels like pretty much every champion but Tristana, you know, has a place to be played, has something to do. You know, you could play them, and it's not like a terrible thing, right? And that's a good expansion, right? But I think the reason for that is because that they've pushed a couple of these things a bit too far. You know, obviously there are examples of cards that are just like really, really, really strong and probably need a nerf. We all know that, right? But I just mean on a general level, when you play these new cards against like an old deck, even if that deck, you know, was pretty decent in the past, you know, something like Ash Noxus, you know, something that has been, you know, even at some points like the top deck in the game, even if you play a deck like that, you feel like, what is going on here? I'm getting destroyed by some of these new decks. It just feels like they have the answer to everything, and that they have so much card generation and they have so many options available to them that there's nothing that I can do to keep up. And I feel like for the first time ever in this game, the power creep is just too much. And it makes me a bit worried that, you know, we're going to see similar levels of, you know, for the newer cards in the expansion later on, and that's only going to add to it. You know, like for instance, as I mentioned, Tristana is probably the only champion who's unplayable right now, but that's probably because, you know, Tristana is kind of a weird one to bring out right now because there isn't that many multi-region cards, right? Because we don't have the full Bandle City set. But by the end of Bandle City, I expect Tristana to actually be, you know, pretty decent, because there'll be a full set of, you know, multi-region followers. So, you know, even Tristana will probably become really good at that point. I would not be shocked at all. And it does make me a bit worried that by the time of Bandle City's end, without some, you know, major changes to some of these cards, the only cards that will be like good enough were the cards that were already really, really strong, like a Draven or something like that, that, you know, we're just already really strong, and Bandle City cards. That those will be the only cards that you ever see, because you can't play those old decks anymore, because you're just going to get outclassed every single time you come up against newer cards. And as I say, that hadn't really happened before, but I think now, for the first time, it has. And that makes me, you know, a little bit concerned. But with that said, that's just my opinion, and I would like to hear your opinion on this, because it's one that I think, you know, people haven't really pointed out too much. But I think as soon as I sort of realized it, I was like, oh yeah, it is a bit of a problem. And so I'd love to hear what you think about it. So please leave a comment down below telling me, you know, do you think that the power creep is, you know, a bit too far in this set? You know, are you worried a bit like me that, you know, once we get even more of the Bandle City cards, that, you know, it'll just be a Bandle City takeover, and we'll just be like, you know, that region has to be in your deck? Let me know. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a really, really nice day, everyone.